She was invisible. Not in the usual way people say that, not in some poetic sense. Actually invisible. Natasha Williams stood at the edge of the Remington Grand Ballroom, watching 300 guests admire the event she'd spent 6 weeks orchestrating. Crystal chandeliers she'd personally selected through golden light across Valentino gowns and Tom Ford tuxedos. The champagne tower she'd argued with the caterer about sparkled like liquid starlight. Every detail was perfect. Every detail except her. Around her, Chicago's elite moved like sharks in expensive fabric. They complimented each other's jewelry. They laughed at jokes that weren't funny. They looked through Natasha like she was wallpaper. She'd worn emerald silk tonight because her assistant said it made her glow. Right now, glowing didn't matter. Being seen did. Natasha adjusted her grip on the event clipboard, fingers tight enough to leave marks. She'd coordinated this gala down to the second. She knew which congressman preferred bourbon neat, which socialite was allergic to shellfish, which donors expected handwritten thank you notes by Monday. She was competent, efficient, essential, just never desirable. A woman in a silver gown brushed past her without apology, champagne sloshing dangerously close to Natasha's dress. No excuse me, no acknowledgement. Just the familiar sting of being furniture in a room full of people. Natasha's throat tightened. This was the life she'd built for herself after clawing out of an abusive childhood, after being passed over for every opportunity because her skin was too dark for corporate America's taste, after watching lighter-skinned women get promotions she'd earned. She'd told herself that respect mattered more than recognition. Tonight proved that was a lie she'd been telling herself to survive. The energy in the room shifted. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they changed pitch. Heads turned toward the entrance like sunflowers following light, or predators tracking movement. Natasha followed their gaze and felt something cold slide down her spine. A man stood at the ballroom entrance. Black suit, black shirt, no tie. Wrong for the dress code, but somehow making everyone else look overdressed. He was young, maybe 32, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair styled with deliberate precision. His presence didn't command attention so much as demand it. Security hovered near him, but didn't approach. Important guests nodded in his direction, but didn't wave him over. Kim Sung-min. She knew the name before someone whispered it behind her. And he was looking directly at her. Natasha's survival instincts, honed from years of navigating hostile spaces, screamed at her to look away. Men like that didn't look at women like her unless they wanted something. And whatever they wanted always cost more than it was worth. But she couldn't move. His gaze held her pinned like a moth under glass. He crossed the ballroom floor. The crowd parted without him asking, conversations dying in his wake. Natasha's heart hammered against her ribs. She should walk away. She should disappear into the catering kitchen or the coat check or anywhere that wasn't here. But her feet wouldn't obey. Kim Sung-min stopped 3 feet away. Up close, his eyes were darker than she'd expected. Not cruel, but measuring. Calculating. Seeing things she'd spent years learning to hide. You planned this event, he said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in an accent that turned consonants sharp and vowels soft. Ah, yes. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Is there a problem with something? No. His head tilted slightly, studying her. Everything is perfect. Almost. Almost. Natasha bristled. She triple-checked every detail. What's missing? You're standing in the corner like you don't belong here. His gaze swept the ballroom, then returned to her. That's the only flaw I see. Heat flooded Natasha's face. Humiliation or anger, she couldn't tell which. I'm working. No. Kim stepped closer. Close enough that she caught the scent of something expensive and cedar dark. You're hiding. The truth of it punched the air from her lungs. Before she could respond, before she could retreat into the professional distance she'd perfected, Kim Sung-min did something that shattered the careful reality she'd built. He took her hand. The ballroom froze. Kim lifted her hand slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he lowered his head and pressed his lips against her knuckles. The kiss was soft, reverent, and absolutely impossible to misinterpret. 300 guests stopped breathing. Champagne glasses paused mid-sip. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every person in that ballroom turned to stare at the black woman in emerald silk and the Mafia boss who just claimed her in front of everyone who'd ever overlooked her. Natasha's world tilted on its axis. Her hand burned where his lips had touched. Her mind screamed at her to pull away, to laugh it off, to do something that would let her survive the social fallout. But Kim's grip was gentle and unmovable, and his eyes held a challenge that wasn't meant for her. It was meant for everyone watching. "They see you now," he murmured, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "The question is, do you see yourself?" Then he released her hand and stepped back, creating space but not distance. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Natasha stood frozen, her heart a drum solo in her chest, knowing with absolute certainty that her life had just split into before and after this moment. And she had no idea which version terrified her more. Chapter 2. A man with teeth behind his smile. Kim Sung-min didn't ask permission. He simply extended his arm, a gesture so smooth it seemed choreographed, and waited. The entire ballroom held its breath. Natasha stared at his offered elbow like it might explode. Her mind screamed contradictions. Run. Stay. This is insane. This is everything you've wanted. 300 pairs of eyes bored into her back, waiting to see if the invisible woman would dare take the hand of the most dangerous man in Chicago. She took it. His arm was solid beneath her palm, warm through the expensive fabric. The moment her fingers made contact, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The whispers crescendoed, then abruptly stopped. Kim began walking, and Natasha had no choice but to move with him, drawn along like a satellite captured by a stronger gravity. "Relax," he murmured, his accent making the words sound like a command rather than a suggestion. "You're holding your breath again." She exhaled shakily. "People are staring. Let them." His tone suggested the opinions of 300 guests mattered less than the champagne bubbles floating past their heads. "You created this beauty. You should walk through it like you own it." They moved through the ballroom, and Natasha watched reality rearrange itself around them. The congressman who'd looked through her 20 minutes ago suddenly stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ms. Williams, wonderful event. Truly exceptional." The society matron who'd nearly spilled champagne on her earlier now smiled with too many teeth. "Natasha, darling, we must discuss you planning my daughter's wedding." Every person who'd treated her like furniture now treated her like crystal. Fragile, valuable, worth noticing. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like drowning. "You're angry," Kim observed, guiding her toward the terrace doors. Fresh air hit Natasha's face like a slap, cold and clarifying. The October night bit through her silk dress, but she welcomed the discomfort. It was real, unlike everything happening inside. "I'm not angry," she lied, pulling away from him. The terrace was empty except for fairy lights and the distant hum of traffic. "I'm confused. Why did you do that?" "Do what?" "Don't." Natasha turned to face him, heat rising in her chest. "Don't play games. You kissed my hand in front of everyone. You made a spectacle. Why?" Kim leaned against the marble railing, utterly relaxed. "I've been watching you for 3 months, Natasha Williams. Since the hospital fundraiser in August. You wore navy blue. Organized the entire event from a corner table, never once drawing attention to yourself." The breath left her lungs. 3 months. That's... She couldn't finish the sentence. "Creepy. Romantic? Terrifying? You move through rooms like a ghost," he continued, his dark eyes reflecting the fairy lights. "Efficient. Invisible. Essential but never celebrated. I wanted to know why someone with your talent would work so hard to disappear." "Maybe I like being invisible," she shot back, even though they both knew it was a lie. "No." Kim pushed off the railing, closing the distance between them. "You've learned to survive it. That's different. Survival isn't the same as living." The words hit too close to bone. Natasha wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're stronger than anyone in that room gives you credit for." His voice softened, losing some of its edge. "I know beauty isn't softness. Real beauty is what remains after everything tries to break you. And you, Natasha." He paused, and for a moment, something almost vulnerable flickered across his face. "You're still standing." She wanted to be angry at him for seeing too much, for speaking truths she'd never said aloud. But underneath the anger was something more dangerous, recognition. Like looking into a mirror that reflected not her face, but her soul. "I'm not some project for you to fix," she said quietly. "I don't need rescuing." "Good." Kim smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "I don't rescue. I recognize." A sound from inside made them both turn. Through the glass doors, Natasha saw a man in a dark suit approach one of Kim's security detail. Words were exchanged, brief, tense. The security guard's hand moved to his waist. Kim's posture shifted subtly, becoming something coiled and ready. "Excuse me," he said, his voice suddenly empty of warmth. "Stay here." "What's wrong?" But he was already moving, crossing the terrace in 3 strides. Through the glass, Natasha watched the exchange. The man in the dark suit leaned close, whispering something. Kim's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the ballroom seemed to drop 20 degrees. Security materialized from nowhere, flanking him. A waiter dropped a tray. The congressman who'd been so friendly minutes ago suddenly found an urgent reason to be elsewhere. Natasha's hands went numb. She'd been so distracted by his attention, his words, the intoxicating feeling of being seen, that she'd forgotten the most important detail. Kim Sung-min wasn't just wealthy, wasn't just powerful. He was something else entirely, something that made grown men afraid. He returned 5 minutes later, his expression perfectly controlled. "I apologize for the interruption. Shall we go back inside?" "Who is that man?" "No one important." "Kim." "No one important," he repeated, and this time the steel in his voice was unmistakable. Then softer. "You're shivering. Let's get you inside." But Natasha couldn't move. Couldn't shake the image of those security guards, the way people had scattered, the whispered words she'd caught from guests as they'd walked through the ballroom. "That's him. I heard he. Be careful." "I should get back to work," she said, hating how her voice shook. Kim studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Simple. Black. Just a phone number embossed in silver. "When you're ready to stop pretending you don't want answers, call me." He left her standing on the terrace, his absence somehow louder than his presence. Natasha made it through the rest of the event on autopilot. Guests continued to acknowledge her, but the validation felt hollow now, tainted by the knowledge that she'd only earned it through proximity to danger. By the time the last attendee left at midnight, she was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. In her tiny studio apartment 3 hours later, Natasha sat on her bed with her laptop open, Kim's business card beside her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should sleep, should forget this entire night, should go back to being invisible and safe. Instead, she typed, "Kim Sung-min, Chicago." The search results loaded. News articles with headlines that made her stomach clench. Police investigation stalls in warehouse district case. Business owner refuses to comment on redacted. Federal authorities unable to redacted. Page after page of redacted information, sealed records. Witnesses who recanted testimonies. And then, buried in a 3-year-old article from an independent journalist. Sources close to the investigation describe Kim as untouchable. Not innocent, untouchable. There's a difference, and it's a difference that costs lives. Natasha's hand trembled as she closed the laptop. She picked up the business card, its weight suddenly feeling like lead. Outside her window, Chicago glittered with 1,000 lights, each one a small lie about safety. She thought about the way Kim had looked at her. Like she was valuable. Like she mattered. Like she was worth fighting the entire ballroom for. She thought about the fear in people's eyes. The whispers. The violence implied in every carefully redacted headline. And she thought about how, for the first time in 28 years, someone had seen her. Really seen her. Even if that someone might destroy her. Natasha waited 3 days before calling the number. 3 days of jumping at shadows, of refreshing news sites for articles about warehouse fires and missing persons, of lying awake at night replaying the moment Kim's lips had touched her hand. 3 days of pretending she had a choice. She didn't. They met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. His suggestion, her veto of his first 5 suggestions. "Somewhere public," she'd insisted over the phone. "Somewhere normal." "I don't do normal," he'd replied, but he'd agreed anyway. He was already there when she arrived, sitting in the back corner with a clear view of both exits. Black sweater, dark jeans, looking like every other affluent 30-something in Chicago. Except for his eyes. Those eyes tracked her approach the way a predator tracks movement. Alert, assessing, patient. Natasha sat across from him without preamble. "Who are you?" "Kim Sung-min." He took a sip of his coffee, utterly relaxed. "You already know my name." "No." She leaned forward, keeping her voice low. "Who are you really?" "Because I spent 3 days reading about sealed investigations and witnesses who disappear. About businesses that fold overnight and rivals who leave town without explanation. So tell me the truth, or I walk out of here and you never contact me again." For a long moment, Kim said nothing. Then he set down his cup with careful precision. I run an organization that operates outside legal boundaries. Import, export, protection information. I control territory from the loop to the south side. People who cross me regret it. People who work for me are protected. I've killed 3 men in my life. All of them were trying to kill me first. He met her gaze without flinching. I don't pretend to be good, Natasha. I protect what's mine. The honesty was somehow more terrifying than any lie. Natasha's hands clenched around her coffee cup. And what am I to you? Another possession? No. The word came sharp and immediate. You're the first thing I've wanted in 5 years that wasn't about power or survival. You're the first person who looked at me at that gala and saw a man, not a weapon. He paused. You're the first thing that scares me. I scare you. She almost laughed. I'm an event planner. You're a... She couldn't say it out loud. Saying it made it real. Mafia boss, he finished calmly. Criminal. Killer. I've been called worse. But yes, you scare me. Because I can control everything in my world except how I feel when you walk into a room. Natasha's heart hammered against her ribs. I should leave. I should run so far from you. Then run. Kim leaned back, his expression unreadable. I won't stop you. I won't follow you. Your choice, Natasha. It's always your choice. She stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to move toward the door. This was the smart decision. The safe decision. The only decision that didn't end with her name in a redacted headline. She made it to the parking lot before her phone buzzed. Unknown number. There are 2 men in a black SUV across the street. They've been following you since you left your apartment. They're not mine. Don't react. Walk to your car normally. Drive to the address I'm sending you. I'll handle them. Ice flooded her veins. Natasha's eyes flicked up. Black SUV, tinted windows, parked in a spot with a clear view of the coffee shop entrance. How long had they been there? How hadn't she noticed? Another text arrived with an address. Then, trust me. Please. She got in her car with trembling hands and drove. The address led to a warehouse in an industrial district she'd never heard of. Natasha's rational mind screamed at her to call the police, to drive to a station, to do anything except follow instructions from a man who'd just admitted to being a criminal. But whoever was in that SUV wasn't the police. And Kim had said please. The warehouse door was unlocked. Inside, the space was surprisingly clean. Exposed brick, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. A dozen men in dark clothing moved through the space with military efficiency. At the center of it all stood Kim, speaking in rapid Korean to a man with a scar across his jaw. He saw her and immediately crossed the room. You're safe now. What the hell is happening? Natasha's voice cracked. Who were those men? Competitors. They saw you with me at the gala. They think you're leverage. His jaw tightened. They're wrong. Leverage for what? For me to make mistakes. Kim guided her toward a private office, away from the organized chaos. Sit, please. Let me explain. Over the next hour, he told her everything. The territory disputes. The delicate balance of power between families. The rival organization that had been looking for weaknesses since Kim had refused to partner in their human trafficking operation. He spoke with brutal honesty, never sugarcoating the violence or the moral compromises. I don't hurt innocents, he said quietly. I don't deal in anything that preys on the vulnerable. Drugs, weapons, information, fine. But there are lines I don't cross. It's why some people hate me. I'm bad for business. You're a criminal with ethics? Natasha couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. I'm a criminal who still remembers being human. He looked at her. My father was murdered when I was 16. Rival gang. I had a choice then, become a victim or become untouchable. I chose survival. And then I chose to survive with whatever honor I could keep intact. Before Natasha could respond, the scarred man knocked on the door. A rapid exchange in Korean. Kim's expression hardened into something deadly. He turned to Natasha. I need to handle something. Stay here. You're safe. I have 12 men in this building who'll die before they let anyone touch you. Kim. But he was already moving. Through the office window, she watched him confront 3 men who'd been brought in. They were bloodied, terrified. Kim spoke to them in English. For her benefit, she realized. His voice was cold, controlled, terrifying. You followed her. You threatened what's mine. Give me one reason I shouldn't end this now. The men stammered explanations. Kim listened without expression. Then he made a phone call, spoke briefly in Korean, and hung up. Your boss has 60 seconds to call me, or I send pieces of you back to him in separate boxes. 40 seconds later, his phone rang. Natasha couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the result. The men were released, escorted out by Kim's people. No blood, no bodies. Just a message delivered with surgical precision. When Kim returned to the office, Natasha stood. You could have killed them. Yes, but you didn't. No. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. Violence is a tool, Natasha, not a solution. I use it when necessary. Tonight, it wasn't necessary. Tonight, a phone call worked better. She should have been horrified. Should have run. Instead, she closed the distance between them, her hands reaching up to frame his face. You're wrong about one thing. What's that? I didn't see a man at that gala. Her voice softened. I saw someone who understood what it meant to be underestimated. Someone who saw me when no one else could. Someone who looked at my darkness and never once tried to make me lighter. Kim's breath caught. Natasha. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't soft or tentative. It was fury and fear and 3 days of fighting against the inevitable. His hands came up to her waist, pulling her closer, and suddenly the world narrowed to this. His mouth on hers, his heartbeat against her palms, the desperate certainty that she was falling towards something she couldn't survive but couldn't avoid. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kim pressed his forehead against hers. You can still walk away. I know. This life, my life, it's dangerous. People will try to hurt you to hurt me. I know that too. Then why? Because for 28 years, I've been trying to survive by being invisible. And you're the first person who made me want to be seen. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Even if being seen destroys me. Kim's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and every muscle in his body tensed. We have a problem. What kind of problem? He showed her the message. A single photo. Natasha entering her apartment building. Timestamp, 3 hours ago. Below it, 4 words in Korean and English. We know about her. The attack came 36 hours later, on a Tuesday afternoon when Natasha was supposed to be safe. She'd been coordinating a corporate luncheon at the Drake Hotel, triple-checking seating arrangements and dietary restrictions, trying to pretend her life hadn't become a thriller novel. Kim had insisted on security. 2 men in dark suits who followed at a discreet distance. She'd argued. He'd been immovable. Non-negotiable, he'd said. You want independence, I respect that. You want to die because I was too proud to protect you. That's not happening. So she'd relented, and now 2 strangers shadowed her through the hotel's service corridors while she confirmed the champagne delivery. The first gunshot shattered a window in the main ballroom. Natasha's world exploded into chaos. One of her security guards, she thought his name was Marcus, slammed into her, driving them both behind a catering cart. The second shot hit the wall where her head had been 3 seconds earlier. Hotel staff screamed. Glass rained down like crystalline snow. Stay down, Marcus shouted, his weapon already drawn. Into his radio. Code red. Drake Hotel. Primary asset under fire. I repeat. The third shot caught him in the shoulder. He went down hard, blood blooming across his white shirt. Natasha's mind went blank with terror. This was real. This was actually happening. A black van screeched to a halt outside the shattered window. Men poured out, faces covered, weapons raised. Not police. Not rescue. Hunters. And she was prey. Natasha ran. Her heels slipped on broken glass. She kicked them off, sprinting barefoot down the corridor toward the kitchen. Behind her, gunfire erupted. Marcus returning fire despite his wound, buying her seconds she didn't know how to use. Her lungs burned. Her heart threatened to explode. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, pulling up Kim's number. He answered on the first ring. Natasha. They're here. Her voice came out as a sob. Drake Hotel, they're shooting. Marcus is down. Get to the loading dock. Now. I'm 3 minutes away. Do not stop for anything. His voice was controlled chaos. Lethal calm wrapped around nuclear fury. In the background, she heard him shouting orders in Korean. Natasha, listen to me. Run. I'm coming. She burst through the kitchen doors. Chefs scattered. Someone dropped a tray of lobster bisque. Natasha didn't stop, couldn't stop, her feet slipping on the tile as she ran toward the loading dock exit. Behind her, she heard boots pounding. They were in the hotel. They were coming. The loading dock door loomed ahead. 15 feet. 10. 5. A hand grabbed her arm. Natasha screamed, twisting violently. Her elbow connected with something soft. A grunt of pain. She wrenched free, her self-defense classes from years ago flooding back on pure instinct. She ran through the door into blinding daylight, and straight into Kim Sung-min. He caught her with one arm, the other holding a gun that looked wrong in his elegant hands. His men poured past them into the hotel, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. Kim's eyes scanned her face, her body, checking for injuries with desperate speed. "You're bleeding," he said. Natasha looked down. Her feet were torn from running on glass, leaving bloody footprints on the concrete. "I'm okay. Marcus, he was shot. My people have him. He'll live." Kim pulled her toward a waiting car. "Get in. Now." The world tilted as he pushed her into the back seat and followed, his body covering hers as the car peeled away from the loading dock. Through the window, Natasha watched Kim's men converge on the hotel entrance. The sound of gunfire was distant, muted, surreal. "Stay down," Kim ordered, his hand on her head, pressing her face against his chest. His heart hammered against her ear, the only sign that he was as terrified as she was. They didn't speak during the 20-minute drive. Natasha's hands shook so violently she had to clench them together. Kim's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on something beyond the windshield. Some internal calculation of violence and revenge that she couldn't begin to understand. The car pulled into an underground garage. Concrete. Dim lighting. Another warehouse. Another safe house. Another reminder that this was Kim's world and she was just visiting. Except visiting meant dying today. The safe house was industrial and anonymous. Exposed brick, minimal furniture, windows covered with blackout curtains. Kim's people moved through the space like ghosts, setting up equipment, making phone calls, transforming the space into a command center within minutes. Kim guided Natasha to a bathroom. "Sit." She sat on the edge of the tub, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Kim knelt in front of her, first aid kit in hand, and began cleaning the cuts on her feet. His hands were impossibly gentle for someone who'd been holding a gun 15 minutes ago. "This is going to sting," he warned before applying antiseptic. It did. Natasha hissed through her teeth, tears springing to her eyes. Not from the pain, from everything else. From the hotel exploding into violence. From Marcus bleeding on the floor. From the reality that loving Kim Sung-min meant becoming a target. "I almost died," she whispered. "No." Kim's hands stilled. "You didn't. I wouldn't let that happen. You weren't there." Her voice broke. "You were 3 minutes away. If I'd been slower, if Marcus hadn't." She couldn't finish the sentence. Kim set down the gauze and looked up at her. There was something raw in his eyes, something that looked like fear. "You're right. I wasn't there. And that's why this ends now." "What do you mean?" He stood, pacing the small bathroom like a caged animal. "They know you matter to me. They'll keep coming. Again and again until they either take you or kill you. I thought I could protect you. Thought I could keep you safe while keeping you close. I was wrong. Kim, you need to leave Chicago." His voice was steel-wrapped in devastation. "Tonight. New city, new identity, complete separation. I have people who can arrange it. 6 months, maybe a year. Long enough for me to end this war and make sure you're forgotten." The words hit like physical blows. "You want me to disappear? I want you to live." He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Kim Sung-min looked helpless. "I'm in love with you, Natasha. I'm so completely in love with you that I can't think straight. And that's exactly why you have to go. Because the people who want to hurt me will use you until there's nothing left. And I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't watch them destroy you." Natasha stood on shaking legs, her bandaged feet protesting. "You're in love with me." "Yes. And your solution is to send me away. It's the only way to keep you safe." "What if I don't want safe?" Her voice rose, anger burning through the fear. "What if I'm tired of running? Tired of being invisible? Tired of playing it safe while my life passes me by? Then you're being stupid." Kim's control finally cracked. "Do you know what they would have done if they'd caught you today? Do you understand the kind of pain?" He stopped, jaw clenched. "I've seen what my enemies do to people I care about. I won't let that happen to you. Even if you hate me for it." "I don't hate you." Natasha closed the distance between them, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I'm terrified. I'm furious. I'm shaking so hard I might fall apart. But I don't hate you. I love you, you idiot. I love you, and it's the worst timing and the most dangerous decision, and I don't care. Kim's hands came up to frame her face. You should care. Well, I don't. Tears streamed down her cheeks. For 28 years, I've made safe choices. I've been invisible and careful and smart. And I've been miserable. You made me want to be seen. Made me feel powerful. Made me feel like I was worth fighting for. You don't get to take that away now. Natasha, his voice was broken. Being with me means always looking over your shoulder. It means violence and fear, and never being certain you'll survive the day. That's not love. That's a prison sentence. Then let me choose my own prison. She pulled his face down to hers. Let me choose you. They kissed like they were drowning, desperate and messy and real. Kim's hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck. Both of them trying to memorize this moment before reality tore them apart. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kim pressed his forehead against hers. I can't keep you safe if you stay. I know. My enemies won't stop. They'll escalate. Today was a warning. Next time. I know, she repeated. Tell me what happens if I stay. So he did. Every brutal detail. The kidnapping attempts. The torture. The ways his enemies had broken people he cared about. By the time he finished, Natasha was shaking again, but this time from fury rather than fear. How long? She asked. How long would I have to hide? 6 months minimum. Maybe longer. She stepped back, her decision crystallizing. Okay, I'll go. The words tasted like ashes. But not forever. You end this war. You make me safe. And then I come back. Those are my terms. Kim looked at her like she'd just driven a knife into his chest. Natasha, do we have a deal? For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. 6 months. I swear to God, 6 months. Promise me you'll survive, she whispered against his chest. I promise. They both knew it was a lie. 2 hours later, Natasha sat in the back of an SUV with tinted windows, a new phone with a single contact, and a suitcase packed by someone else. Kim stood on the curb, his face carved from stone, his hands shoved in his pockets to keep from reaching for her. Where am I going? She asked through the open window. Better if you don't know yet. My people will brief you when you arrive. His voice was professionally neutral, but his eyes were devastated. Natasha, don't. She couldn't hear goodbye. Couldn't make this real. 6 months. You promised. 6 months. The window rolled up. The car pulled away, and Natasha watched Kim Sung-min disappear in the side mirror, standing alone on an empty street, looking exactly like what he was. A king who'd just lost his only weakness, and his only reason to stay human. The safe house in Portland smelled like pine and loneliness. Natasha had been there for 43 days. She knew because she'd been counting, scratching marks into her journal like a prisoner tracking time served. 43 days of looking out windows at trees instead of skyscrapers. 43 days of using a burner phone with one contact that never called. 43 days of wondering if Kim Sung-min was alive or dead. Her handler, a woman named Sarah with kind eyes and a gun under her blazer, brought groceries every 3 days. Still no news, she'd say before Natasha could ask. That's good news. No news means he's winning. Or it meant he was already gone, and they hadn't figured out how to tell her yet. Natasha spent her days in a fog of routine. Morning run through the woods. Afternoon reading books she couldn't remember. Evening staring at her phone, willing it to ring. She'd memorized Kim's last words, 6 months. I swear to God, 6 months. But what if 6 months was a lie he'd told to make her leave? What if he'd known all along that ending this war meant not surviving it? She dreamed about the hotel, the gunfire, Marcus bleeding on the floor. But mostly she dreamed about Kim's face through the car window. Stone and devastation and goodbye. On day 44, something changed. Natasha woke at 3 a.m. with her heart racing, drenched in sweat. No nightmare. No sound. Just a bone-deep certainty that something was catastrophically wrong. She grabbed her phone. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. But the wrongness wouldn't leave. It pressed against her chest like a physical weight, suffocating and insistent. By dawn, she was pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Sarah arrived at 9 a.m. with groceries and found Natasha already dressed, her face pale but determined. I need to go back to Chicago, Natasha said. That's not possible. Something's wrong. I can feel it. Sarah's expression remained professionally neutral. You're isolated. Anxiety is normal. Don't patronize me. Natasha's voice cut like glass. I know what anxiety feels like. This is different. Call your people. Find out what's happening. Please. For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Then she pulled out her phone and stepped into the kitchen. Natasha couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched Sarah's face shift from neutral to concerned to horrified. When Sarah returned, her gun hand was shaking. Get your things. What happened? Kim walked into park territory 2 hours ago. Alone. Unarmed. He offered himself in exchange for ending the war. The world tilted sideways. Natasha's knees buckled. Is he? We don't know. Communications went dark 30 minutes ago. We're en route to Chicago now. Sarah's professional mask cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Natasha didn't remember packing. Didn't remember the drive to the private airfield or the flight back to Chicago. She existed in a space beyond panic, beyond fear. A cold, crystalline clarity where only one thought survived. He can't be dead. He promised. They landed at a private hangar outside Chicago at 2 p.m. A car was waiting, along with 3 of Kim's people she recognized from the warehouse. The scarred man, she'd learned his name was Gene, opened the door with an expression that looked like grief. Where is he? Natasha demanded. Mercy Hospital. Intensive care. Jin's English was heavily accented but clear. He's alive. Barely. The drive to the hospital took 17 minutes. 17 minutes of Jean explaining what had happened in clipped, furious sentences. Kim had contacted the Park family, his oldest, most vicious rivals, with an offer. Himself in exchange for peace. A clean slate. No retaliation, no revenge. Just him. He walked into their territory at dawn, Jean said, staring out the window. No weapons. No backup. Just Kim Sung-min and his fucking death wish. They beat him for 3 hours. Broke ribs, collapsed lung, internal bleeding. When they were done, they called us to come collect the body. His voice broke. But he wasn't dead. Somehow, the bastard wasn't dead. Natasha's hands clenched into fists. Why would he do this? Jean finally looked at her. You know why? She did. God help her, she did. The hospital was controlled chaos. Kim's people had taken over the entire ICU floor. Armed guards at every entrance. Doctors who'd been paid enough to ignore the obvious criminality of their patient. Natasha pushed through them all, following Jean to a private room at the end of the corridor. Nothing could have prepared her. Kim lay in the hospital bed, barely recognizable. His face was swollen and bruised, one eye completely shut. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped with mechanical precision. His breathing was labored, each exhale sounding wet and painful. His hands, those elegant, deadly hands, were wrapped in bandages. Natasha's knees gave out. Jean caught her, holding her upright as sobs tore through her chest. Oh God! Oh God! What did they do to him? What he let them do? Jin's voice was bitter. He didn't fight back. Not once. Just took it until they got bored or satisfied or whatever the hell they needed to feel. Then he told them the war was over, and if they came after any of his people again, if they came after you, he'd come back and finish what his restraint started. A nurse appeared, young and terrified. You're Natasha? Yes. He's been asking for you. Every time he regains consciousness. She checked the monitors. You can go in. Just don't upset him. His blood pressure. But Natasha was already moving. She crossed the room on legs that barely held her, pulling a chair beside Kim's bed. His uninjured hand lay on top of the blanket. She took it carefully, her fingers trembling. Kim, she whispered. I'm here. I'm right here. His functioning eye opened slowly, unfocused and glazed with painkillers. It took him a moment to register her presence. When he did, something like relief flickered across his battered face. You're supposed to be in Portland. Each word cost him. His voice was ruined, raw from screaming. You're supposed to be alive. Tears streamed down her face. You promised me 6 months. You promised. Couldn't wait. A ghost of his usual control flickered through the pain. Every day, you were gone, they had leverage. Had to end it. By letting them kill you. Her voice broke. That was your plan. Die so I could be safe. Didn't die. The corner of his mouth twitched, trying for a smile with a split lip. Disappointing. I know. Natasha pressed her forehead against their joined hands, sobs shaking her entire body. You're an idiot. A complete idiot. I told you to survive. I told you. Had to choose. Kim's grip tightened fractionally. Your safety or my pride? Easy choice. There's nothing easy about this. She looked up at him, fury and love and terror all tangled together. You walked into enemy territory alone. You let them break you. You could have died, and I would have spent the rest of my life wondering if loving you was what killed you. Worth it. His eye was starting to close, exhaustion or medication pulling him under. You're worth everything. No. Natasha stood, leaning over him carefully, avoiding his injuries. We're worth everything. Together. Not you sacrificing yourself while I hide. Not me being safe while you're dying. Together, Kim. That's the only way this works. He tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His eye closed. The heart monitor beeped steadily. He was still alive. Still breathing. Still hers. Jean appeared in the doorway. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical. If he survives that, he'll survive. Natasha didn't take her eyes off Kim's face. He promised me 6 months. He doesn't break promises. You're staying. I'm never leaving again. She settled into the chair, her hand still holding Kim's. He walked into hell for me. The least I can do is walk him back out. Kim woke fully 26 hours later. Natasha was still there, dozing in the chair with her head on his bed. Her hand hadn't left his since she'd arrived. Natasha, he whispered. She jerked awake instantly. You're awake. Oh, thank God you're awake. I'll get the doctor. Wait. His grip tightened. Don't go. I'm not going anywhere. She sat back down, her free hand coming up to touch his face with infinite gentleness. I'm done hiding. Done running. Done pretending that safety matters more than this. It's not over. The war is over. Jean had entered behind them holding a phone. The Park family called. They're accepting your terms. Full ceasefire. No retaliation. They said. He paused, something like respect in his voice. They said any man who'd walk unarmed into their territory and survive 3 hours deserves to be left alone. Kim closed his eye, relief and pain warring across his features. It's done. It's done, Natasha confirmed. She leaned close, her lips brushing his uninjured temple. You ended it. You crazy, self-sacrificing idiot. You actually ended it. For you. His voice was barely audible. All of it for you. I know. Her tears fell onto his face. And now you're going to heal. And then we're going to have a very long conversation about making decisions together instead of you playing hero. Together, he repeated, as if testing the word. Together, she confirmed. No more separation. No more sacrifices. Just us, figuring out how to survive this life. Deal. Kim's hand tightened around hers. Deal. Outside the window, Chicago stretched into the distance. Dangerous and beautiful and utterly indifferent to the small miracle happening in room 847. A miracle where love proved stronger than violence, where courage meant staying instead of running, and where 2 people who'd spent their lives invisible finally chose to be seen. Together. Kim spent 6 weeks healing. 6 weeks of physical therapy and wound care and learning to breathe without pain. 6 weeks of Natasha sleeping in a chair beside his bed until he was strong enough to argue, and then sleeping in his bed until the doctors cleared him to go home. But healing wasn't just physical. On a cold November morning, Kim called a meeting with his inner circle. Natasha sat beside him. Not behind, not in another room, but beside him as an equal. Jean and the others shifted uncomfortably at first, unused to outsiders in their strategy sessions. But Kim's message was clear. She wasn't an outsider anymore. I'm restructuring, Kim announced. Consolidating. The protection rackets stay. People need security, and we provide it better than the police. The information networks stay. But the rest? He pushed a folder across the table. The weapons deals, the offshore accounts tied to trafficking routes, the partnerships with groups that don't share our ethics. It all ends. Today. Jin's scarred face remained impassive. That's half our revenue. I know. The families will see it as weakness. Let them. Kim's voice was steel. I didn't survive the Park family beating to keep building an empire that costs me everything I care about. We go legitimate where we can. We stay sharp where we must. But we do it with lines we don't cross. Because of her? Jin's eyes flicked to Natasha. Because of me. Kim leaned forward. I walked into enemy territory and let them break me because I'd become someone who valued power over life. That man is dead. What I'm building now is different. Natasha watched him transform his entire world with quiet declarations and immovable resolve. He wasn't becoming soft. She'd seen him handle a territorial dispute 2 weeks ago with the same lethal efficiency as before. But he was becoming intentional, choosing his battles, choosing his humanity, choosing her every single day. 3 months after the hospital, Natasha stood in her new office. Not a corner of someone else's space, but her own firm. Williams and Associates Event Management. The name gleamed on the glass door in elegant script. Sarah, her former handler turned assistant, appeared with coffee. The Fitzgerald wedding just confirmed. They want you specifically. Said they heard you're the best in Chicago. They heard right. Natasha grinned, taking the coffee. No false modesty. No shrinking. She was the best, and she'd stopped apologizing for knowing it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kim. Lunch at noon? I have something to ask you. Her heart stuttered. They'd been living together for 2 months now, learning each other's rhythms. His early morning routines and her late-night planning sessions. His preference for silence and her need to talk through problems. His dark world and her determination to bring light into it without pretending the darkness didn't exist. It worked. Impossibly, beautifully it worked. She texted back, I'll be there. Kim had chosen the same terrace where he'd first pulled her aside at the Remington Gala. Natasha stepped through the glass doors and found him standing by the railing, dressed in a dark suit that made him look like he'd walked out of a painting. Nostalgic, she asked, joining him. Reflective. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Do you remember what I said to you that night? After I kissed your hand. You said, they see you now. The question is, do you see yourself? And do you? He stepped closer. See yourself. Natasha thought about the woman who'd stood in this spot 6 months ago. Invisible. Desperate for validation. Willing to accept crumbs of recognition from people who'd never valued her. That woman felt like a stranger now. I see a woman who's stronger than anyone gave her credit for, she said quietly. Including herself. Good. Kim reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black box. Because I need you to see something else. He knelt. Kim Sung-min, the untouchable Mafia boss who'd walked into enemy territory and survived, knelt on the terrace stones like a man who'd finally found something worth surrendering for. I'm not proposing as a king, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Not as someone who commands or owns or controls. I'm proposing as a man who's terrified of losing the best thing that ever happened to him. A man who wants partnership, not possession. A man who promises to choose you every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He opened the box. The ring inside was stunning. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. Natasha Williams, will you marry me? She looked at him. This complicated, dangerous, impossibly tender man who'd seen her when no one else could. Who'd dismantled parts of his empire to build a life with her. Who'd taken a beating rather than risk her safety. Who'd knelt not because she demanded it, but because he chose to. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, certain. Yes. Kim slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and future, and everything they'd fought to survive. When they broke apart, both smiling, Natasha realized she was crying. Happy tears? Kim asked, wiping them away with his thumb. The happiest. She laughed. Though I should warn you, I'm planning this wedding myself, and I have opinions. I'd expect nothing less. For months later, the Remington Grand Ballroom glittered with the same opulence that had witnessed their first meeting. But everything else was different. Natasha stood in the bridal suite, staring at her reflection. The wedding gown was custom, flowing white silk that draped like water, sleeveless and elegant and completely without structure. No corset, no boning, no suffocation, just fabric that let her breathe. Her stylist had tried to suggest shapewear, just to smooth things out. Natasha had declined. Her body was her body, strong and soft and exactly as it should be. She was done apologizing for taking up space. Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding Natasha's bouquet. It's time. You ready? I've been ready my whole life. The ceremony was intimate despite the grandeur. 50 people who actually mattered, not 300 guests who'd looked through her. Kim's family had flown in from Korea. Natasha's chosen family, friends who'd stood by her through the chaos, filled the front rows. When the doors opened and Natasha stepped into the ballroom, the same ballroom where she'd once been invisible, every head turned. But this time it wasn't shock. It was recognition. Respect. Celebration. She walked down the aisle alone. No one to give her away, because she'd always belonged to herself. Kim waited at the altar, and the expression on his face made her heart stutter. Wonder. Awe. Love so fierce it was almost tangible. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You're breathtaking." "I know," she whispered back, smiling. The ceremony was brief and perfect. Traditional vows with personalized additions. Kim promised to choose partnership over power. Natasha promised to choose courage over safety. They promised to see each other, really see each other, every day for the rest of their lives. When the officiant declared them married, Kim pulled Natasha close and kissed her like they were the only two people in existence. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Natasha barely heard it. She was too busy memorizing this moment. The feel of Kim's hands on her waist, the taste of forever on her lips, the absolute certainty that she'd chosen right. The reception was everything Natasha had envisioned. Music and laughter and dancing. Food that actually tasted good instead of just looking expensive. Toasts that made people cry and laugh in equal measure. But the most important moment came an hour into the reception, when Kim led Natasha onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The crowd quieted. The music swelled. And Kim took Natasha's hand, the same hand he'd kissed 6 months ago, and pressed his lips against her knuckles with the same reverence. But this time it wasn't a dare. This time it was a promise kept. Natasha looked around the ballroom, at the guests who finally saw her, at the life she'd built from rejection and pain, at the man who'd chosen to kneel before her when the whole world told him to stand tall. She thought about the woman she'd been, standing in corners and hoping to be noticed. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that being seen started with seeing yourself. That safety was an illusion, but courage was a choice. That love wasn't about being saved. It was about two people choosing to save each other, again and again, every single day. Kim pulled her close as they swayed to the music. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking," Natasha said, her voice full of joy and tears and hard-won triumph, "that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "And where's that?" She smiled against his shoulder. "Everywhere. Anywhere. With you." The music played on. The ballroom sparkled. And Natasha Williams Kim danced with her husband in a room full of people who'd finally learned what she'd always known. That darkness, when claimed and celebrated, isn't something to overcome. It's something to crown. And she wore that crown like it had always been hers. Because it had.